All right, let's get some practice and reminders on how to make a graph successfully. So the first thing we need to do is use our ruler and draw the lines onto our graph. So when you're using graph paper, which you always should be for a graph, the best thing to remember to do is actually draw right on the lines on the paper. No need to draw in between them. Good. Okay, and we're going to start by reminding ourselves that these two lines, the horizontal and the vertical line, have special names. The horizontal line is called the x-axis, and the vertical line is called the y-axis. And where those two lines meet is a very important point. It's the point of 0. And I'm going to write both my zeros, 0 from the x-axis and 0 from the y-axis, on the line right now. Okay? The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to figure out the scale. Now the scale for the time, which is going to go along the x-axis, is quite easy because it counts from 0 up to 5. So I can either spread out my numbers, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 5, or I can write them on every line. Now I'm probably going to spread them out because I think that I've got enough room and it's going to make my points look nicer. On the y-axis, though, we have a different story. My numbers start at 88 and end at 152. That means that when I make these points, they're all going to live up here, and I'll have a lot of empty space underneath. I don't really want that empty space. So what I'm going to do is something called cutting or breaking the graph. When we cut or break the graph, we use one of two symbols. The first symbol is two sort of dash lines like that, or another symbol you can use kind of looks like a lightning bolt. And what you do is you put it low down on the graph, on the y-axis, near the 0, so we know that a whole piece of that graph has been removed and sort of hidden for later. Okay? Let's see if we can erase that. There we go. So if I do that, it means that I don't have to start counting at 0 and go 10, 20, 30 all the way up. I can start at a number closer to where my first data point is, which is 80. So I'm going to start with the number 80 right here, again on the line. And I'm going to count by tens all the way up my graph. I want to go a little bit further than my last data point, which is 152. I'm going to go all the way to 160. It's a little bit above my point. Now that I have both of my data scales in, and I'm checking to make sure that they're accurate, I'm going to put and plot in my points. So my first point is 0 minutes and 88 beats per minute. So if I do that, right above the 0, and you guys are good at this estimating, I'm going to estimate it's pretty close to 90, and I'm going to use a circle to represent my first point. My next point of 1 minute is 104 beats per minute. So I go to my number 1, and I go above it to where I think 104 is. Now if I remember 105 is in the middle, my point's going to be a little bit below. I'm going to continue to do this with the rest of my data points. 3, 4, and 5. Then I'm going to use my ruler. Did you ever play that game, Connect the Dots? I'm going to, oops, don't want that kind of line. I'm going to use my ruler to play Connect the Dots and join up all of my lines here. There we go. So now I've got a nice curve. At this point, you're probably thinking, all right, the graph is done, but we're missing a few pieces of vital information. First is an informative title. A title should tell us what we see in the graph. So this is a graph of my heart rate when I jogged for 5 minutes. So I'm going to write that as my title, heart rate when jogging for 5 minutes. And of course I'm using my pencil, and I'm going to underline it in red using my ruler. So that title is a good one because it tells me exactly the information I'm going to see in the graph. My x-axis needs a label too. Now the x-axis is telling us time in minutes. I always put the unit in. So minutes is our unit here. Sometimes we may have degrees Celsius if we're dealing with temperature. We may have centimeters if we're dealing with length. I'm also going to label my y-axis, which is heart rate. The unit for heart rate is beats per minute. I'm going to put that all down there. You can see I kind of wrote it sideways. Then I'm going to use my ruler and red pen again to underline these two labels. And there we go. We have a completed graph.